Aaron Stern, a man in his 90s, sat in a small room. Every wrinkle on his face told a story of pain that would never fade. His eyes stared straight into the camera, deep and empty, as if they had witnessed things the mind could never forget. He said nothing, just remained silent, and that silence was more powerful than any words. Mr. Aaron began to tell his story, his voice shaking. They told us that it was just a relocation to a better place, a place to work. I remember them saying, "You will have jobs, you will be fed." But I didn't believe it. There was something in their voice. Something cold, cruel. Though he survived, the memory of that scent still haunted him every night. It was a sickly, sweet mist, and then the screams of hundreds of people were swallowed up. One morning in March 1942, thousands of Jews gathered in Lublin. They believed the promises, believed that this was a chance to survive. But then, some saw special trucks appear with two strange exhaust pipes. They did not understand, but a feeling of fear rose. A fear that could not be named. My mother, she held my hand. Aaron choked out. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her desperation. She knew something we didn't. I asked her, "Mom, where are we going?" She just said, "We're going to a better place, son." But her eyes didn't lie, and I knew that was the last time I would hear her voice. Mr. Aaron wiped away tears. His voice choked. He had to tell this story, had to tell the world that this happened. Because if we stay silent, it will happen again. In 1942, the Nazis moved from event massacres to a systematic program. It was not a random change, but a strategic one. The mass killings of the Einsatzgruppen, mobile death squads, in the Soviet Union had accomplished their mission, but they were too slow, too psychologically costly for German soldiers, and most importantly, not efficient enough to deal with millions of people. The question is not just who did it, but how did an entire system manage to operate such a massive death machine? What we are faced with is a massive bureaucracy built on hatred, a machine designed not to create but to destroy. Who funded the genocide? The victims themselves. Their money, gold, jewelry, and even their clothes were confiscated. It was all collected, sorted, and put into a special bank account in Lublin. This account was used to pay the German railways, pay the guards, and keep the camps running. They even had a pricing system for the victims. Adults paid full fare. Children aged 5 to 14 were discounted, and children under 5 were free. The cruelty was unimaginable. This was a story of cooperation on a grand scale across borders. The core question we must answer is, why would humans do such things to their fellow humans? And did anyone try to stop it? Collaboration did not come only from the Germans. Governments such as the Vichy regime in France played a key role. They provided lists of Jews, they carried out arrests, and they handed over foreign Jews to the Nazis. They believed that by doing so, they could save the French people. It was a bargain with the devil, a deal that, in the end, cost everyone. They created an environment to prove their propaganda. Jews were locked up in ghettos, stripped of everything, and then became symbols of disease, of filth. That made their extermination easier for everyone else. Jew Ring summed it up coolly. The Jewish question is being handled here properly, without sentimentality. That was the only explanation they needed. When news of the gas trucks in Chelmno reached the Warsaw Ghetto, it was more than just news. It was a turning point. The Jews of Warsaw knew that this was not a deportation, not a labor camp. This was a planned death. A young man who had escaped from Chelmno, Yakov Gronowski, told what he had seen. Gronowski's account caused a stir, but he was not the only one. Other escapees also brought news of the massacres to the ghetto. However, the Jewish leadership was faced with a terrible choice. On one side were the young people, the Bund activists, who wanted armed resistance. They said, "We must fight. Death with honor is better than death in the gas chambers." On the other side were the older people, the members of the Jewish Council's Judenrat, who believed that resistance would only lead to the death of all. The contrast between hope and despair has never been clearer. The young see hope in resistance, in fighting. The old see hope in compromise, in surviving by buying time. They believe that if they cooperate, They can save some lives. They have calculated, they have bargained, but no one has given them a good choice. Meanwhile, in the Warsaw Ghetto, a group of scholars led by Emanuel Ringelblum secretly collected all the evidence. They created One Egg Shabbat, an archive for posterity. It was a fight against forgetting. They were faced with questions that had no answers. Who should we send first? The elderly or the children? The intellectuals or the workers? Could we do anything to save the rest? One of the leaders of the Jewish Council in Amsterdam said, "Intellectuals are more important than workers." To us, that sounds cruel, but to him it was a desperate choice to save those he considered more important. Aaron Stern said his mother didn't know. She believed they were going to a better place. She tried to protect him from the truth. But the others, they knew. He saw the fear in their eyes. They tried to escape, but they were caught. Some were shot on the spot, in front of everyone. It was a message that there was no escape. The head of the Warsaw Jewish Council, Adam Czerniakow, also knew they were facing total extermination. He had told his staff that he had prepared a poison pill for each person if things got too bad. When the mass deportations began in July 1942, he refused to sign the deportation list. He could not bear the weight of that responsibility. He committed suicide. It was a symbolic event. It was an admission that there was no hope. While the debates about resistance or compromise were going on in the ghettos, the Nazi extermination machine continued to grind on. This period marks the height of the drama and tension as the story nears its climax. The French police carried out their largest roundup, the Veldhiv roundup. They provided lists of Jews, they made arrests, and they handed over foreign Jews to the Nazis. The Vichy government in France believed that by doing so, they could save the French people, but it was a bargain with the devil, a deal that, in the end, cost everyone. Meanwhile, in the Warsaw Ghetto, Emanuel Ringelblum and his One Egg Shabbat group are racing against time to collect evidence of these crimes. They secretly interview survivors, record horrifying stories, and bury documents in metal crates. It is an unequal battle, a fight against oblivion. They know that what they are doing is important, but they also know that they may never see the results. Stories of betrayal and kindness from local people are also woven into this period. One woman recounts that her mother said she never looked the neighbors who denounced them in the eye. She believes that the shame was so great that they bowed their heads. But there are also stories of courage. Peasants hid Jewish children, families opened their homes to strangers. It shows that even in the darkest moments of history, there were rays of kindness. Aaron Stern recounted his story, his voice filled with exhaustion and despair. "My mother didn't know. She believed we were going to a better place. She was trying to protect me from the truth. But the others, they knew." He saw the fear in their eyes. They tried to escape, but they were caught. Some were shot on the spot, in front of everyone. It was a message that there was no escape. In mid-1942, Reinhard Heydrich, the main architect of the final solution, was assassinated in Prague by Czech resistance forces. This did not slow down the genocide program, but rather accelerated it. SS leaders saw this as an invitation to step up the massacres even further. Everything was planned, and the ultimate goal was to exterminate all Jews in Europe. The story of the despair of Adam Czerniakow, the leader of the Warsaw Jewish Council, is also included in this section. He refused to sign the deportation list and committed suicide. It was a symbolic event, an admission that there was no longer any hope. The fragile hope was crushed, and the story now became one of a battle of despair. Tensions rose as the packed train cars began to move toward the extermination camps. The promises of labor camps rang hollow. The letters thrown from the cars, hastily written and tearful, held a glimmer of hope, but also a sense of confusion and fear. "We're going east. I think everything will be fine." A comforting lie to counter an unbearable truth. All the efforts, hopes, and debates now led to one end. The journey to the extermination camps had begun. It was becoming direct and inevitable. From the ghettos of Poland and other occupied countries, trains full of people began moving toward the death camps of Operation Reinhard Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. Each train was a story of horror. Jews were crammed into cattle cars with no food or water. Many died along the way. But what awaited them at the end of the journey was even more horrifying. When they arrived, survivors were treated brutally. The screams of guards, the cracking of whips, and the barking of dogs were constant. They were herded out of the train and told that this was a transit camp. The SS told them that they would be washed and disinfected and then taken to labor camps. This was a final lie, an attempt to keep the victims calm and not resist. The able-bodied men were separated to work, while the elderly, women, and children were taken to the bathrooms. But they don't know that the bathroom is actually a gas chamber. The heavy doors close, trapping them in darkness and fear. This is when all the conflicts come to light and the characters face their fate. While one group was being herded into the gas chambers, the next group waited outside. Some realized what was happening. Despair and terror were written all over their faces. They tried to say goodbye to their loved ones, to protect their children until the last moment. Some guards reported seeing parents speaking softly to their children, pointing to the sky, trying to comfort them with their last lies. As the gas chamber doors closed, the atmosphere became tense to the extreme. The screams of the victims could be heard by both the guards and the people living nearby. The screams lasted for several minutes, then gradually faded. Finally, there was silence. A heavy, cold silence, the silence of death. The brutality did not stop there. After the gas had done its work, other prisoners, known as Sonderkommandos, were forced to carry the bodies out. At first, the bodies were buried in mass graves. Later, when the number of dead became too great, crematoriums were built. Those who were not strong enough to go into the gas chambers, such as the sick, the elderly, or orphans, were shot on the spot. They were taken to mass graves and shot from behind. Sometimes they were forced to look at the bodies already in the pits before they were killed. This climax is not a single event, but a series of repeated atrocities. It shows the cruelty of humanity, but also the resilience of the victims. Even though they know that death is approaching, many still try to protect their loved ones until the last moment. This is the peak of evil, but also the peak of courage and sacrifice. After the climax of the atrocities, a heavy silence fell over the extermination camps. The main conflicts had been resolved in the most horrific way, and now the story moves to the aftermath and change. What happens after the last screams have fallen silent? What remains is unspeakable loss, silent sacrifice, but also a fragile hope of recovery and the survival of memory. 3 prisoners escaped from Belzec. They brought back horrifying stories, but sadly, no one believed them. People could not believe that such atrocities could exist. They refused to face the truth, clinging to the lies about the labor camps to maintain a last shred of hope. However, the truth could not be hidden forever. Gradually, people living near the extermination camps began to notice unusual things. They smelled the stench of rotting corpses, they heard the engines running around the clock, and they witnessed trains arriving packed with people and leaving empty. The story also traces the fate of the documents buried by the One-Egg Shabak group. They risked their lives to preserve history for posterity, and these documents became the most vivid evidence of Nazi crimes. After the war, these documents were found, revealing part of the untold horror. We learn about the feelings, the thoughts, the desperate decisions faced by the victims. We learn about life in the ghetto, about hunger, disease, and corruption. These documents are not only historical evidence, but also the legacy of a people that was wiped out. This section also delves into the psychological consequences for survivors. Aaron Stern, the man who opens the story, is a prime example. He survived, but the memories of those he lost still haunt him every day. He has to live with the question of why he survived when his loved ones did not. He no longer believes in promises, no longer believes in human kindness, and he has to fight the ghosts of the past. The story also explores the consequences for local people. Some became complicit, profiting from the suffering of others, but others felt remorse and guilt. They had to live with the silence, with the secrets they had witnessed. Their stories show that indifference and silence are also forms of guilt. After the silent screams and the heavy silence of the mass graves, the story does not end. The legacy of the tragedy remains, reminding us of the costly lessons humanity has learned. Analyzing these lessons is essential to ensuring that what happened will never happen again. One of the greatest lessons is the rise of hatred and indifference. The Holocaust was not a sudden event. It was the result of a long process, nurtured by propaganda, discrimination, and hatred. The Nazis turned the Jews into symbols of disease, of filth, and of all that was bad in society. This made it easier for others to take away their dignity and ultimately their lives. The collaboration of governments and individuals is also a painful lesson. As we have seen, the Vichy regime in France handed over lists of Jews, the French police made arrests, and ordinary people denounced their neighbors. This shows that genocide was not only committed by a group of people, but also by the complicity of a system and a part of society. The story raises the question, when does silence become complicity? Third, this story is a reminder of the importance of memory. People like Emanuel Ringelblum fought to record history for posterity to ensure that this atrocity is never forgotten. Their documents are not just evidence of atrocities, but also the legacy of a culture and a people that were wiped out. It is our responsibility to continue their stories, to ensure that future generations will understand what happened. The story also connects past issues to present issues. We still see the rise of hatred, discrimination, and indifference in society today. This documentary is not just a story about the past, but also a warning for the future. It raises thought-provoking questions. What have we learned from history? Can we prevent a similar tragedy from happening? After going through all the pain and loss, we must find a final message that leaves a deep and lasting impression in the minds of the audience. This message is not an ending, but a beginning, a call to action and reflection. Aaron Stern, who opened the story, appears again. He is no longer a trembling man, but a man who has found strength in telling his story. He looks straight into the camera, his voice now steadier and stronger than ever. They took everything from me. My mother, my father, my family. But they couldn't take my memories. I have to tell this story, because if I don't, who will? If we stay silent, the dead will die again. They will be forgotten, and the crimes of the murderers will be meaningless. His words are a powerful affirmation of the importance of remembering and recounting. They are a call to not be indifferent to injustice, not to turn a blind eye to hatred. Finally, the screen flashes a quote from Elie Wiesel, another Holocaust survivor. The opposite of love is not hate, but indifference. This is a powerful message that sums up everything the film is trying to convey. Hatred can be defeated, but indifference can allow hatred to grow without limit.